Hi everyone. So, we had to make a dynamic sphere for one of our projects. Maybe some people would say that it takes away too much effort at the development stage, so why bother wasting time? Actually, we frequently hear these sorts of comments about how the poor developers will struggle to make this or that effect. This challenge has never daunted us, and if anything, it adds great variety to the sort of routine work so many people are stuck with because they lack creativity. Making this effect required some prep work, which we'll talk about later on. We'll unpack all the details of the UI stage using Blender and After Effects. So, let's do this. I'm adding an artboard of an iPhone 11 Pro X. Now I'm marking the primary screen elements, the meter scale, and the meter reading. Put simply, this screen displays the level of the user's security based on in-application tests and surveys. There are lots of varieties of tests that take into account how you use your smartphone, which functions are turned on or off, whether you download files from the web, whether or not you can recognize phishing mailing lists, and other details. These tests provide the foundation for gathering stats to calculate your safe score. I'm placing additional functional elements. The second half of the screen will have the changing graphic score. Now I'm adding points at equal distances to achieve a better balanced graphic and adjusting line width. I'm adding a timeline below, placing the tab bar even lower down. UX is all set. Based on the client's brief and our own research, I've decided on a dark main theme for the application. It makes the graphic elements really pop and the information is easy to read. The primary font is Poppins. It's available at the Google Fonts library. Now I'm adjusting the colors and fonts. Let's add a gradient to the timeline to soften how it disappears beyond the screen boundary. Now I'll fill in the space above the graphic and make a light gradient that flows upward. I'll show one of these active states of the UI when a specific month is selected and the value above corresponds with the active state. Let's shift over to the tab bar and mark it into 5 sections, where the icons will be displayed. Next, I'm drawing the icons in accord with concepts I prepped beforehand. In addition, I always recheck myself with 100% zoom. With the first icon, I'm showing the active state as a glow with the layer blur effect. I'm returning to the start icon. When you tap it, you'll transition to the leader list, while simultaneously polishing up various details. Initially, we presented the client with a more classical variant of transitioning to the other screen, but it was rejected. The client was inspired by our creative work and especially the liquid swipe, so they wanted that specific effect in their own application. By the way, we have an entire design course dedicated to that effect. I'm straightening out all the icons and placing them at the right height from the bottom edge of the screen. I'm checking that everything lines up and replacing the star icon with a more appropriate cube. The client requested that the Safe Me score counter be replaced with particles. Now it's time to use the 3D tool Blender. I'm opening Blender, and with Shift A, we get the UV sphere. I adjust the number of polygons. The source of the particles is going to be the points of intersection on the sphere. By adjusting their number and location, I can control the animation. Let's increase the number of segments to 64. That way, there will be enough space between the lines, which are made from little particles. Let's also increase the number of rings to 200, so we get a more compact structure. Now I'm adding two emitters. The first is responsible for the beginning of the animation, and the second for its conclusion. I'm setting the animation duration to 60 frames. Now I'm adjusting the segments so that they form a perfect loop of cyclical animations. So I'll set the segment's lifetime to equal the animation duration of 60 frames. For the animation's beginning, I set start on the -60 frame, and the end at 0 frame. Let's check and see the cyclical animation of segments. They're all flying off somewhere, but we need them to scatter in different directions. I'm opening the Field Weights tab and putting gravity at 0 for every emitter. Now the particles are dispersing from the emitter into multiple directions, but they're still too random. We want them to have an attractive and sequential pattern of appearance. So let's go into the Emission tab, and in the Source section, let's replace the source to vertices and remove the checkmark next to Random Order. Let's see what we got. The standard spheres can be replaced with more complicated objects. I'm making a straightforward icosphere by pressing Shift-A. By pressing G, I'm dragging it from the center of the sphere and making it smaller with the S key. I'm hiding the object from the final render. In each emitter, in the Render tab, I set Render As to Object and select from the Object section my icosphere that we made earlier. Now the emitter will take this object as the basis for the segments, and I'll adjust it more later. Right now, I really want to adjust the particle movement since they're just flying straight from the sphere. With Shift-A, I add to the force field turbulence and set Flow to 1. In the emitter settings in the velocity section, I put the initial speed to 0.5. Now let's check. The particles now have a wave-like motion. I'm enlarging the particle size to 14,000. It's time to set up the scene and place the camera in the corner from which I'll be rendering the animation. In the View tab, I open the Align section and select Align Active Camera to View. I'm setting the frame size to 1024 by 1024 pixels. Now I make sure that at any moment during the animation, all the particles are within the frame. I'm going to make one more sphere that's made of glass with the number of rings at 64. By pressing the right mouse button on the sphere, I select Shade Smooth so that the sphere will be smooth during rendering. To prevent the emitter from blocking the glass sphere during rendering, we have to open the Render tab and remove the Show Emitter checkmark. Let's shift over to adjusting our materials. I find icosphere in the Objects list, which we use as our particle. In the Material tab, I click New, so that we can add material to the particles. When you add it, a standard material appears, which I delete. I'm pressing Shift-A, adding particle info in 2 math nodes. I'm duplicating math by pressing Shift-D. The next material, Color Ramp node, is responsible for the particle color. Now emission and transparent BSDF, which will make the particles become transparent. And finally, Mix Shader node, which will mix glow and transparency. Let's set up the connection between the nodes. The second math node value controls at which moment the particles will become transparent. If we set the value at 1.1, then we can see in the render that the particles become transparent at the end of the wave and don't just disappear. We can put several colors into color ramp and the particles will change color throughout the animation. Let's set the glow strength in the emission node to 10. I'm applying the glass material for our sphere and emitter after selecting it from the list of objects. Now I add standard material to it, and in settings, let's put transmission to 1, reduce roughness to approximately 0.14, and transmission roughness to 0.17. We don't see any changes in the viewpoint window since emitter is hidden in render. I press render image or the F12 key. Let's see. We get almost the exact image, but the sphere is still too noisy. This can be fixed by increasing the samples amount to 1000. This is much better quality, even though the render is taking a while for just one frame. Next, I'll adjust the display for the animation and we'll use PNG without compression. Blender has one weird bug. On the animation's final frame, it doesn't display our particles. That's why I'm adding one extra frame. Now I'm increasing the samples to 1500 and turning on the Open Image Denoise mode to reduce noise. Let's press Render Animation. The animation's all set and we can drag the file with the animation to After Effects. It'll immediately load as a sequence. Now we just have to add the color. I'm adding the particle glow effect now. Also adding the particle sphere to the design. To give our sphere the right color, let's select the color blending mode and apply the screen blending mode for the entire layer. I'm approximating the size and evening out a few other elements. Let's add some glow to these particles. I'm duplicating the layer and applying the layer blur effect. The transparency is set to 50%. Our design is ready. Now with the AEUX plugin, I'm transferring the design to After Effects. I make the background color solid so that the blending mode works properly. Now we'll add the animation composition we made earlier and applying the screen blending mode. Final check, the animation looks awesome. This animation went on to development. Our developers tried a few options for how to implement it, but almost all the versions hit performance snags on older devices. In the end, the best option turned out to be developing a PNG sequence. We ended up with about 60 images for 24 frames per second. To minimize the application size, we opted out of adding separate sequences for every color of the animation. We shifted the hue of the original image set to the necessary values. That's how, by using just one set of sequences, we got all the colors we needed for our animation. Good luck working on sweet projects, and until next time.